If protecting the person you hate means losing everything you've worked for, would you still make the same choice? That question wouldn't leave Ethan Brooks alone, but 3 weeks earlier, he would have laughed at anyone foolish enough to ask it. At Westbridge University, everyone knew there were only two names that mattered whenever rankings were posted outside the law building every Monday morning. Ethan Brooks, Noah Carter. First place, second place. Sometimes the order flipped, but never by much, and never without weeks of whispered debates echoing through lecture halls, coffee shops, and campus forums. Professors compared them. Classmates placed bets on them. Freshmen watched them the way sports fans watch championship games. Ethan hated every second of it. Not because he disliked competition. Competition was oxygen. What he hated was sharing the spotlight with Noah Carter, the quiet genius whose effortless confidence somehow made every one of Ethan's victories feel incomplete. Every mock trial became another battlefield. Every classroom discussion turned into another duel. Even the smallest assignment somehow transformed into another chapter in a rivalry neither of them had officially started, yet neither seemed willing to end. Ethan often told himself Noah was arrogant. It was easier than admitting the truth. Noah never bragged. He never mocked anyone. He simply walked into every room carrying the impossible confidence of someone who expected excellence from himself before anyone else could. Somehow, that irritated Ethan even more. This morning was no different. Students crowded around the digital leaderboard outside Hamilton Hall, phones raised, conversations buzzing louder than the nearby fountain. Ethan adjusted the strap of his backpack and pushed through the crowd. Number 1. Ethan Brooks. He allowed himself exactly one satisfied breath before his eyes dropped to the next line. Noah Carter. Just 0. 3 points behind. Again, Ethan clicked his tongue under his breath. You look disappointed for someone who won, came a calm voice beside him. Ethan didn't need to turn around. Maybe I'm disappointed you keep making it harder than it should be. Noah smiled faintly, hands tucked inside the pockets of his navy jacket. Or maybe you're disappointed because winning doesn't feel as exciting anymore. Ethan met his eyes for a brief second before looking away. Keep telling yourself that. Noah shrugged with the kind of maddening calm that always made Ethan feel like he was arguing with someone who had already solved the puzzle before everyone else even found the first piece. See you in constitutional law. He walked away without another word, leaving Ethan standing there surrounded by conversations he could no longer hear. Somehow Noah always did that. He walked away first. He refused to chase. He refused to fight. And somehow, that made Ethan want to beat him even more. As the bell echoed across campus and students hurried toward their next classes beneath rows of maple trees glowing in the early fall sunlight, Ethan made himself one silent promise. Before graduation, before law school, before either of them left Westbridge forever, he would finally defeat Noah Carter once and for all. He had no idea that fate had already begun writing a completely different ending. The promise Ethan had made to himself should have felt satisfying. But by the time constitutional law ended that afternoon, victory already felt strangely unfinished. Professor Linda Harper closed her notebook with a deliberate snap before smiling at the packed lecture hall. I have one final announcement before you leave. The usual chorus of backpacks zipping and chairs sliding across the floor came to an immediate stop. Every student understood that Professor Harper never made casual announcements. Westbridge University has officially been invited to compete in the National Collegiate Constitutional Advocacy Challenge this spring. It is the most prestigious undergraduate legal competition in the country. Excited whispers swept through the room. Ethan's pulse quickened. Winning that competition could open doors to elite law schools, national internships, and scholarships worth more than most students earned in several years. Professor Harper raised one hand, and silence returned. Unlike previous years, the competition committee has changed the rules. Each university may only send one team, and that team must consist of 2 students chosen jointly by the faculty. Ethan felt his confidence settle back into place. There was only one logical outcome. He would be selected. Then Professor Harper smiled again, almost as if she already knew what everyone was about to think. After careful discussion, the faculty has unanimously selected Ethan Brooks and Noah Carter. The room erupted. Someone laughed in disbelief. Another student whispered, "There is no way that will work." Ethan slowly turned toward Noah, who looked just as surprised. although he hit it much better. There has to be a mistake, Ethan said, standing before he even realized it. Professor Harper folded her arms. There is not. We cannot work together. That sounds like a personal opinion rather than a legal argument, Mr. Brooks. A few students chuckled. Ethan ignored them. There are other qualified students. There certainly are, Professor Harper replied calmly. But none who complement each other's strengths the way you two do. Noah finally spoke. Professor, with respect, if Mr. Brooks is uncomfortable, perhaps another arrangement would be easier for everyone. Ethan frowned. Why did that sound less like an escape and more like Noah was trying to protect the room from another argument? Professor Harper shook her head. No, the decision is final. You will prepare together beginning tomorrow. Attendance at every practice session is mandatory. The bell rang, but no one rushed toward the exits. Every conversation centered on the same unbelievable pairing. Ethan stuffed his laptop into his backpack with more force than necessary before heading toward the hallway. Ethan. Noah caught up with him outside beneath the stone archway connecting the law building to the library. Autumn leaves drifted across the brick walkway as students hurried between classes carrying coffee cups and laptops. Ethan kept walking. What? Noah matched his pace without sounding irritated. Neither of us asked for this. That is supposed to make me feel better? No. Noah looked ahead instead of at him. It just means we have the same problem. Ethan finally stopped walking. You are my problem. Noah blinked once before letting out a quiet laugh that surprised even himself. That might be the nicest thing you have ever said to me. Ethan stared, caught completely off guard. Most people argued back. Noah somehow turned every confrontation into something impossible to predict. Before Ethan could answer, Noah checked the message that had appeared on his phone and slipped it back into his pocket. Practice starts tomorrow at 6. We should probably try not to embarrass the university. With that, he walked away toward the student center, leaving Ethan watching his retreating figure with a growing frustration that no longer came entirely from rivalry. For the first time since arriving at Westbridge, defeating Noah no longer seemed like the hardest challenge waiting ahead. The following evening arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Westbridge University feel almost cinematic. Golden leaves skated across the stone courtyard outside the law library while students hurried inside carrying backpacks, coffee cups, and the quiet panic that always settled over campus before midterm season. Ethan reached the moot court practice room 5 minutes early, mostly because he refused to give Noah the satisfaction of arriving first. The room was empty except for a stack of case files waiting neatly at the center table. He dropped his backpack into the nearest chair and opened the folder with a determined sigh. 30 seconds later, the door opened. Noah stepped inside wearing a charcoal sweater beneath his campus jacket, balancing 2 paper cups of coffee and an overstuffed legal binder. You are early, Noah observed with a small smile. Ethan barely looked up. Do not get used to it. Noah placed 1 coffee near Ethan without saying another word before taking the seat across from him. Ethan stared at the cup for a moment. I did not ask for coffee. I know. Noah opened his binder. You look like someone who forgot breakfast. Ethan frowned. That was impossible. Had Noah noticed him skipping the dining hall that morning? He pushed the thought aside and slid the untouched cup a few inches away. Professor Harper entered exactly at 6 o'clock, carrying a timer and several folders. Good. You are both here. She wasted no time explaining the competition materials before assigning them opposing sides in a constitutional argument. At first, everything unfolded exactly as Ethan expected. Every statement Noah made was thoughtful, organized, and frustratingly persuasive. Every counterargument Ethan delivered was sharp enough to earn an approving nod from Professor Harper. They challenged each other for nearly 2 hours, neither willing to surrender a single point. By the end of the session, Professor Harper quietly closed her notebook. You two are exhausting. Ethan folded his arms. Thank you. That was not a compliment. She smiled anyway. Individually, you are exceptional. Together, you refuse to listen. Winning this competition requires trust, not just intelligence. After practice ended, most of the law building had emptied. The evening sky outside had turned deep blue, and the campus lights reflected across the wet sidewalks from an earlier drizzle. Ethan headed toward the parking lot when he noticed Noah walking in the opposite direction instead of toward the dormitories. Curiosity tugged at him before he could stop it. Noah disappeared into the older science building across the quad, a place law students rarely visited after hours. Ethan hesitated only a moment before following from a distance. Through the wide lobby windows, he caught sight of Noah kneeling beside a folding table where volunteers sorted donated winter coats, canned food, and school supplies into neatly labeled boxes. Noah greeted an elderly volunteer with the same quiet warmth he showed almost no one else on campus before rolling up his sleeves and helping carry supplies across the room. There were no cameras, no professors watching, no classmates applauding. Just Noah, laughing softly with a little girl who proudly handed him a box of crayons before running back to her mother. Ethan remained outside beneath the awning, completely still. None of this fit the version of Noah he had carefully built inside his mind over the past 3 years. He had always believed Noah cared only about winning because that belief made the rivalry simple. Yet the person standing inside that building looked nothing like the rival Ethan thought he knew. As Noah lifted another donation box, he paused briefly, pressing one hand against his chest before taking a slow breath. The moment lasted only a second before he smiled again and continued working as though nothing had happened. Ethan frowned. Maybe he imagined it. Or maybe, for the first time since they met, he had just noticed something everyone else had overlooked. By the end of the week, Ethan found himself noticing things he had never paid attention to before. Noah still arrived at every practice session exactly on time, still organized every case file with almost impossible precision, and still answered every legal question with the calm confidence that drove Ethan crazy. Yet there were details Ethan could no longer ignore. Noah rarely touched the snacks other students brought to late study sessions. He quietly stepped outside during long practices, returning a few minutes later with a polite smile that looked slightly more tired than before. Whenever anyone asked if he was all right, the answer was always the same. I am fine. Ethan wanted to believe it. Instead, he caught himself watching Noah more than the case materials spread across the table. Professor Harper noticed it too. During one evening practice, she suddenly stopped the mock argument and folded her arms. You are finally listening to each other. Ethan looked confused. We are still disagreeing. Exactly, she replied. The difference is that now you are responding to each other instead of simply trying to win. The observation lingered in Ethan's mind long after practice ended. As they packed their bags, Noah accidentally left one folder on the conference table. Ethan reached for it, intending to call him back, but a small folded volunteer schedule slipped onto the floor. Across the top were the words Community Outreach Center. Every evening for the next 2 weeks had Noah's name written beside different volunteer shifts. Ethan quietly placed the paper back inside before Noah noticed anything missing. Ready? Noah asked from the doorway. Ethan handed him the folder. You forgot this. Thanks. Noah accepted it with genuine appreciation before the two walked toward the parking lot beneath rows of glowing campus lights. Their conversation remained surprisingly easy. They debated constitutional precedents, joked about impossible professors, and even laughed once when both of them quoted the same Supreme Court case at exactly the same time. For a brief moment, the rivalry almost disappeared. Then they turned the corner near the student union. Several upperclassmen from another academic club stood outside discussing preparations for an upcoming campus leadership event. One of them recognized Noah immediately. Still trying to do everything yourself, Carter? He called with a teasing grin. Another added, you missed another planning meeting because of volunteer work. You should stop pretending you can save everybody. Noah answered politely. I apologized already. I will make up the hours this weekend. You always say that. The conversation remained civil, but the remarks grew increasingly uncomfortable. Noah continued speaking calmly, never raising his voice, never showing frustration, even as the others questioned whether he had taken on more responsibility than he could realistically manage. Ethan watched from a few feet away, surprised that Noah simply accepted every criticism without defending himself. Finally, one of the students noticed Ethan standing nearby. You are his competition partner now, right? Ethan nodded cautiously. The student smiled. Then good luck keeping him from working himself into exhaustion. The group soon headed toward another building, leaving the courtyard quiet again. Ethan glanced at Noah, expecting irritation, but instead found him staring at the darkening sky with an unreadable expression. Does that happen often? Ethan asked. Noah gave a small shrug. People usually mean well. Sometimes they just worry in the wrong way. Before Ethan could respond, Noah's phone buzzed. He read the message, smiled softly, and slipped it back into his pocket. I have one more stop tonight. The community center? Ethan asked without thinking. Noah paused just long enough for surprise to flash across his face before it disappeared behind another calm smile. How did you know that? Ethan realized he had no good answer, and for the first time since their rivalry began, he found himself keeping a secret from the one person he had always believed was impossible to understand. The next several days settled into a rhythm neither Ethan nor Noah could have predicted. Every afternoon, they met inside the moot courtroom, surrounded by towering shelves of legal textbooks and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights that stayed on long after sunset. What began as forced cooperation slowly transformed into something neither of them could explain. They no longer interrupted each other's arguments. Instead, they anticipated them. Ethan would identify weaknesses in a constitutional claim before Noah even finished presenting it, while Noah somehow knew exactly which precedent Ethan would choose before he reached for the casebook. Professor Harper watched one practice with folded arms before finally smiling. That is the first time either of you has sounded like a team. Ethan almost argued, but the words never came. She was right. After practice one evening, heavy rain swept across campus without warning. Students crowded beneath building entrances waiting for it to pass, while thunder rolled softly in the distance. Ethan glanced through the glass doors and sighed. I left my umbrella in the dorm. Noah quietly opened his backpack and pulled out a large navy umbrella. We are walking in the same direction for half the campus. You can borrow half. Ethan hesitated. I can manage. Noah smiled patiently. You probably can. But arriving completely soaked before tomorrow's practice would be inconvenient for both of us. Ethan reluctantly accepted. They stepped into the rain together, careful to keep a comfortable distance beneath the umbrella as they crossed the brick pathways glistening beneath the campus lights. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It simply existed between them like an old habit slowly fading away. As they passed the student center, music drifted from an outdoor charity event where volunteers collected winter clothing for local families. Several students waved enthusiastically at Noah. Thanks again for helping yesterday, one called. Another added, the kids loved the books you donated. Noah waved back with genuine warmth before continuing to walk. Ethan looked at him with quiet curiosity. How many volunteer programs are you involved in? Noah laughed softly. Too many, according to everyone else. Why do you keep saying yes? Noah looked ahead toward the rain instead of answering immediately. Because someone once helped my family when we needed it most. I promised myself that if life ever gave me the chance, I would do the same for someone else. Ethan absorbed the answer without speaking. There was no trace of self-importance in Noah's voice. He said it as though kindness required no recognition at all. They reached the residence hall where their paths separated. Ethan handed back the umbrella. Thanks. Noah accepted it with a familiar smile. See you tomorrow. As Noah disappeared inside another dormitory, Ethan remained outside for another moment despite the rain. The person he had spent 3 years trying to defeat was becoming more difficult to define with every passing day. The rivalry that once felt perfectly clear now carried questions Ethan had never wanted to ask. The following afternoon, during another intense preparation session, Noah suddenly paused in the middle of presenting an argument. His hand rested briefly against the edge of the table as though he needed an extra second to steady himself. Ethan noticed immediately. So did Professor Harper. Would you like to take a short break? She asked. Noah offered the same calm smile he always did. No, thank you. I am perfectly fine. The practice continued, but Ethan could no longer focus entirely on constitutional law. For reasons he did not yet understand, he found himself paying closer attention to Noah than to the competition waiting just weeks ahead. The final week before the regional qualifying round arrived faster than either of them expected, and the pressure across Westbridge University became impossible to ignore. Every afternoon, Professor Harper increased the difficulty of their practice sessions, introducing unexpected constitutional questions with only seconds to prepare a response. Ethan and Noah adapted almost instinctively, finishing each other's legal reasoning with a precision that surprised even themselves. The rivalry that had once fueled every conversation had quietly evolved into trust. although neither of them was willing to admit it aloud. After one particularly demanding session, Professor Harper gathered her papers and looked at both of them with unusual seriousness. You have stopped trying to defeat each other. That is exactly why you finally have a chance to defeat everyone else. Ethan almost smiled. Noah simply nodded. As they packed their materials, Noah's phone vibrated repeatedly. He glanced at the screen, his expression changing for only a brief moment before he slipped the device back into his pocket. Everything all right? Ethan asked without thinking. Noah answered with the familiar calm voice Ethan had come to expect. Just a family message. Nothing important. They left the law building together beneath a sky painted orange by the setting sun. Halfway across campus, Noah excused himself, saying he needed to stop by the administration office before heading home. Ethan continued toward the library alone, intending to review one final case before calling it a night. Inside the nearly empty reading room, he searched the shelves for a constitutional law reference Professor Harper had recommended. The copy was missing, but a student assistant smiled apologetically. Someone checked it out this morning. Maybe this archive folder will help instead. Ethan carried the folder to a nearby table, flipping through old university competition records dating back several years. Most of the documents contained little more than tournament schedules and scholarship announcements until a familiar name caught his attention. Noah Carter. Ethan frowned. The article was from 3 years earlier, during freshman orientation. It described a privately funded emergency scholarship created for students facing unexpected financial hardship. The final paragraph mentioned that the anonymous student who had nominated another classmate for immediate assistance had refused public recognition. Ethan's eyes moved to the attached administrative note. Recommendations submitted by Noah Carter. Recipient, Ethan Brooks. His heartbeat slowed as he reread the page, convinced he had misunderstood. 3 years ago, during Ethan's first semester, his father had unexpectedly lost his job. Ethan remembered receiving emergency financial assistance that had allowed him to remain enrolled, but the university had never revealed who recommended him. He had always assumed it came from a professor. Slowly, another memory returned. During orientation week, Noah had quietly disappeared from a student leadership meeting for almost an hour. Ethan had mocked him afterward, joking that the future top student could not even arrive on time. Noah had simply smiled and apologized without offering an explanation. Ethan stared at the aging document, unable to reconcile it with everything he believed about his rival. Noah had every opportunity to stay silent. Instead, he had helped the very person who would spend the next 3 years trying to surpass him. There had been no audience, no reward, and no expectation that Ethan would ever learn the truth. As Ethan carefully returned the folder to its place, countless memories suddenly looked different. Every competition, every conversation, every quiet smile Noah offered instead of another argument. For the first time since meeting him, Ethan wondered whether the greatest mistake of his college life had not been underestimating Noah's intelligence, but completely misunderstanding the kind of person Noah had always been. The discovery stayed with Ethan all night, stealing every ounce of certainty he had once carried. By morning, the rivalry that had defined 3 years of his college life no longer made sense. Every memory seemed to demand a different explanation. When he arrived at the law building, Noah was already arranging their research notes exactly as he always did, completely unaware that Ethan now carried a secret of his own. "You are early again," Noah said with a friendly smile. "I guess good habits are contagious." Ethan almost asked why Noah had helped him years ago, but the words refused to leave his mouth. Instead, he sat down across the table and quietly replied, "Maybe they are." Professor Harper entered moments later with encouraging news. The regional judges had praised Westbridge's preparation, and the team had become one of the favorites heading into the National Collegiate Constitutional Advocacy Challenge. For the first time since the partnership began, Ethan felt proud that the praise belonged to both of them instead of just himself. Practice flowed more naturally than ever. Their arguments connected seamlessly, and even Professor Harper admitted she rarely needed to interrupt anymore. As the evening session ended, Noah gathered his files but suddenly paused, closing his eyes for only a second before taking a careful breath. "Are you sure you are all right?" Ethan asked quietly. Noah looked surprised by the concern. "I'm just tired. Finals and competition season are not the easiest combination." Ethan nodded, although the answer did not fully convince him. 2 days later, the team traveled to the state capitol for the opening rounds of the competition. The courthouse hosting the event stood beneath a bright autumn sky, its marble columns reflecting the afternoon sunlight as students from universities across the country filled the lobby with nervous conversations. Westbridge advanced through the preliminary round with an outstanding performance, earning praise from multiple judges for their teamwork. As they left the courtroom, another team passed nearby. One student glanced toward Noah before whispering something to a teammate. Within minutes, several competitors were staring at their phones. Ethan noticed the sudden change in the atmosphere. A notification appeared on his own screen. Someone had anonymously posted screenshots on a student forum claiming Noah had received confidential competition materials before the event. There was no proof, only carefully edited images and accusations spreading faster than anyone could stop them. Ethan looked up in disbelief. Noah's face had turned pale, but he remained remarkably calm. "This is not true," Noah said softly. Professor Harper immediately stepped forward. "Do not respond online. We will handle this through the official process." Unfortunately, rumors moved much faster than facts. By evening, students from other universities were already questioning Westbridge's victory. A competition official informed Professor Harper that Noah would need to meet with the review committee the following morning while the investigation remained pending. If the allegations were believed, the entire team could be disqualified before the next round even began. Back at the hotel, Ethan could not sleep. Every instinct told him the accusations were impossible. The same person who had quietly protected a struggling freshman without expecting gratitude would never compromise his integrity for a competition. As midnight approached, Ethan stepped into the empty hallway and noticed a light still glowing beneath Noah's door. He hesitated before knocking. After a few seconds, Noah opened the door with a tired smile, several legal documents spread across the desk behind him. "I figured you would be asleep," Noah said. Ethan looked directly into his eyes. "Noah, tomorrow they are going to ask you to prove who you are. The problem is that I already know the answer. Now we just have to make everyone else believe it too." Morning arrived beneath gray skies, and the courthouse seemed quieter than it had the day before. Conversations stopped whenever Noah walked through the lobby. Some students looked away. Others whispered behind polite smiles. Ethan noticed every reaction, and each one made the silence feel heavier. The review committee convened before the semifinal round, giving Noah an opportunity to respond to the accusations. Professor Harper presented attendance records, faculty statements, and official competition procedures, demonstrating that no confidential materials had ever been shared with the Westbridge team. Noah answered every question calmly, never raising his voice, never showing resentment toward those who doubted him. Even under pressure, he remained the same person Ethan had slowly come to know over the past several weeks. Just as the committee appeared ready to conclude, another anonymous message surfaced online, this time containing altered timestamps that seemed to strengthen the accusations. Murmurs spread across the courtroom lobby once again. A committee member announced that while the evidence remained unverified, Westbridge would be temporarily suspended from competing until the matter was resolved. The decision landed like a heavy weight. Months of preparation seemed to disappear in a single sentence. Noah lowered his eyes for a brief moment before quietly saying, "I understand." Ethan stared at him in disbelief. "You are not even going to argue?" Noah offered a tired smile. "Arguing without proof will not help anyone." Those words awakened something inside Ethan. 3 years earlier, Noah had defended a struggling freshman without asking for recognition. Now he was prepared to quietly accept suspicion rather than create more conflict. Ethan suddenly remembered the old scholarship records, the volunteer schedules, the countless moments Noah had chosen integrity when no one had been watching. He stepped toward the committee before anyone could stop him. "I have something to say." Every conversation in the room fell silent. Ethan looked directly at the panel. "For 3 years, I believed Noah Carter was simply the person standing between me and first place. I measured him only by scores and rankings because it was easier than admitting he challenged me to become better. Last week, I learned something that changed everything. During our freshman year, when my family faced financial hardship, someone anonymously recommended me for emergency scholarship assistance. I discovered that person was Noah. He never told me. He never expected thanks. If he wanted personal advantage, That was the perfect opportunity. Instead, he protected someone who spent years trying to defeat him. The room remained completely still. Ethan continued, his voice steady. Character is demonstrated through consistent choices made when no one is watching. I have seen those choices every day since we became partners. I trust Noah Carter completely. And if that trust means our team loses the chance to compete today, then I accept that outcome without regret. Professor Harper watched quietly, pride visible in her eyes. Several committee members exchanged thoughtful glances before requesting a short recess to verify the newly presented information. Nearly an hour later, they returned with updated findings. The anonymous online posts had originated from an external account unrelated to Westbridge University, and digital investigators confirmed the screenshots had been manipulated. The accusations were officially dismissed. Westbridge was immediately reinstated. Relief swept through the room, but Noah remained motionless until the committee chair finished speaking. Then he slowly turned toward Ethan. "You knew," he said softly. Ethan nodded. "I know enough." For the first time since they met, Noah's carefully composed expression faltered, replaced by quiet gratitude that needed no further explanation as the two walked side by side toward the courtroom, no longer driven by rivalry, but by a shared purpose neither of them had expected to find. The semifinal became the turning point of everything Ethan and Noah had built together. Every argument flowed with confidence. Every response reflected countless late nights of preparation, and every judge could see the trust that had replaced competition. When the final decision was announced, Westbridge University advanced to the championship round by a unanimous vote. For the first time, Ethan celebrated without checking whether he had outperformed Noah. Their victory belonged equally to both of them, and somehow that made it more meaningful than any individual achievement he had ever earned. A few hours later, beneath the bright lights of the championship courtroom, they delivered the strongest presentation of their college careers. The judges praised their reasoning, their professionalism, and the remarkable partnership they had demonstrated throughout the competition. When Westbridge was declared the national champion, applause echoed through the room as Professor Harper embraced both of her students with unmistakable pride. Reporters gathered outside afterward, eager to ask how two famous rivals had become such an extraordinary team. Ethan exchanged a brief glance with Noah before answering with a smile. Sometimes the person who challenges you the most is also the person who helps you become the best version of yourself. Noah looked at him with quiet appreciation, but said nothing. He never needed many words. Weeks later, the spring semester came to an end, and graduation arrived beneath a cloudless blue sky. Families filled the football stadium while graduates in dark blue gowns laughed, posed for photographs, and celebrated the future waiting beyond Westbridge University. Ethan accepted his diploma to enthusiastic applause from his parents, who had no idea that the young man standing only a few feet away had quietly changed the course of their son's life years earlier. After the ceremony, students slowly drifted across campus for one last afternoon together. Ethan found Noah standing beside the old maple tree overlooking the central courtyard, the same place where they had once argued about rankings and victories. The campus felt different now, not because the buildings had changed, but because they had. "So," Noah said with a gentle smile, "does this mean I finally lose my title as your biggest rival?" Ethan laughed, remembering the promise he had made beneath those same autumn trees months before. "Actually, I think I was wrong all along." Noah tilted his head slightly. "About what?" Ethan looked across the familiar campus before meeting Noah's eyes again. "I spent years believing I needed to defeat you to prove my worth. The truth is, you were never standing in my way. You were walking beside me the entire time. I was simply too stubborn to notice." Noah smiled more warmly than Ethan had ever seen before. "You figured it out eventually." They began walking toward the university gates together, carrying diplomas in one hand and new possibilities in the other. There was no dramatic confession, no grand gesture, only the quiet certainty that some relationships are built through patience, respect, and countless small choices made over time. As they reached the sidewalk leading away from campus, Noah asked softly, "Where do we go from here?" Ethan answered without hesitation, "Wherever life takes us, we do not have to compete anymore. I would rather build the future together." Noah nodded, and the two continued forward beneath the warm afternoon sunlight, leaving behind the rivalry that had introduced them and carrying with them a friendship transformed into something deeper, stronger, and filled with hope for every chapter still waiting to be written.